Okay, so what I do is I find a lot of people that are basically trying to achieve a basic PHP API, and I wanted to basically quickly show you how I do it if I need to set up something quickly, and how basically what kind of steps I take to further develop it. So how would basically stuff like that work in general? So what we would do is we want to achieve a basic CRUD operation. So the preparations that I took so far is, so I created an empty folder, that's the PHP API, and I also generated a database with, I called that PHP API as well, and I created a table product. Yeah, that's empty, of course. The table product has basically an ID. So I'm using binary 16 because I prefer working with UUIDs, so unique IDs rather than auto-incremented IDs, but that's up to you. Then a name, a description, a price, an insert date, and a delete date. You can basically, that's my primary key. If I probably, can I just generate a, well, you know what, we're going to look how that looks like in a second. So I generate this. Now I'm going to use a tool that will require me to have this one called ID and delete date to be in existence, right? The rest is kind of free game, but that's what you want to do. And so what I'm going to do is I have installed the following: Composer, Node and npm, Git, and the neoan3 CLI. Okay, so that's all stuff that you will find down in the description of this video, and you want to have that installed in order to basically use the full capacity of like packages and so on. So let me actually close all of this stuff here. Yeah, terminate. So I'm going to open up a fresh new terminal in that folder, and the first thing that I'm going to do is, you see right now it's an empty folder. I'm basically going to install the out-of-the-box neoan3. So this is something that's available for you as soon as you have installed the neoan3 CLI. And I'm going to say, okay, new app, and I'm going to call it PHP API in that case. Okay, so yep, going to register that name. Okay, got it. So at this point, what I can do is, and I'm going to do this in a secondary terminal because I'm going to let this run all the time. So I'm going to say, okay, neoan3 develop, and what's going to happen then is it's going to open up a localhost that I can basically now kind of start here. And let me actually get rid of a couple of those things here. So this is not what we want. Oops. Hold on. It's the wrong one. This is what we want to close. Close. And this is what we want to have over here. Okay. So this is now our localhost 8080, and it's going to run the neoan3 out of the box framework. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump back to my first terminal, and you can do that in all kinds of things, like your CMD in Windows, or your terminal in your Linux, or your in your VS Code, like however you want to do this. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to generate a new component. So I'm going to say neoan3, get the mouse out of there, new component, and I'm going to call this component product. Okay. So, and I'm going to basically select that's going to be an API endpoint mainly, right? And so I have only the demo frame, and I'm going to use that one for now. So normally you have a choice of your own frames, but not going to worry about that right now. So now I basically created this component. So let's check that out. I'm going to open up the component folder, and I will find, okay, now I have product. Now, how does this work in general? Well, pretty simple. Get product and post product is our functions that are automatically generated, and this is basically my my routes, right? So now product get exists, and how this works out of the box without touching it, it uses the V1 RESTful API, what does that mean? If I simply return something here, so let's just say I want to return the body. And then I go over here and say, okay, so that is going to be API, and you can see it's product, that one, right? Slash product, and then I send question mark ID equals 2, then it will return a JSON for me with 2, right? So I'm simply going to return this. So this is already a functioning API endpoint, right? I could basically already say like message valid endpoint. Okay, and what I would see is here this message valid endpoint in my JSON response. So that's pretty straightforward. But whoops, what we want to do, I am so not where I want to be. This is where I want to be. What I want to do is basically get now the product information out, right? But I don't have any kind of product in here as of yet. So what I am going to do in step 1 is I'm simply going to create a product here. So in my post product, what I'm going to say is, and I'm going to use the, no, actually, let's start with the frame. Let's start with a little bit of setup here. So again, I'm using this demo frame, as you can see. See, that's what we're using for this API endpoint. So I'm going to jump in there. And so there's not much in here. What I do want to do is I want to create a function construct here. And so the reason why this warns me is I'm now overriding the construct of the serve, which I don't want to do. So I'm kind of like calling super in a JavaScript environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say parent construct so that everything runs normally. But the reason why I want to add to this construct is I want to set up our DB environment. So that's going to be a try and catch block. And I'm going to say, okay, DB. Now this comes with it. You can see it's a neoan3 /apps. So what my IDE does is it automatically generates the use. So do you see how it's up here generated? If that doesn't happen for you, you might as well just write it like this, right? Or do this manually. It's something that happens automatically for me. And then I'm going to say, okay, set environment. And so what I want to do is I want to set the name of the database. And that's going to be product. And I also want to say, because I did this binary 16, so in my case, I want to set assumes UUID to true. Okay. Now, there are a couple of defaults that the DB wrapper expects, so that the host is localhost and that the user is root. That is the case in my setup, but my password is not empty. So I have to set my password to my local thing here, and my local password is Nachtschatten. This could be empty. There are absolutely no security threats on your local system, right? Whatever you call that is fine. And now I basically have the environment set up. So I'm going to basically, in this case, say catch this DB exception. Same here, be careful. See, my ID added it automatically. And so the reason why I want to do this is, in our case, since we're developing here so far, I actually want to var dump and die the error message if I cannot connect. Right, that's something we should know. If that's wise in production, is something we're going to address in a different setting, but I mean, this is not what this is about. So now I basically set up the database connection, and I'm ready to make my transactions. So let's look at that. So in the post, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, use the DB here as well. Again, be careful, you need to use it. And then I'm going to say ask. So ask is quite a simple markup that I'm just going to use here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to define the table. The table is called product. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm simply going to say body. Okay. Now, this is highly insecure. Don't forget that. I'm not going to return anything right now, and the only thing that I'm assuming at this point is that we don't want to work with something like Postman, so I'm going to kind of fake this right here for now. So what I'm going to say is this post product, and what I'm going to do here is to say, so we have a name of test product, right? And we have a description of some cool goggles, and we have a price of I don't know, $12.99. Okay, so the question now is, okay, what does this do? And this is maybe something that we would want to look at first. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a little trick, and here say, okay, this is my insert, and I'm also going to var dump and die this insert. Okay, there's a particular reason for that, because I want to kind of hard debug. I'm also assuming that you're not using xdebug or something like that. So I'm going to set db to debug, and that is a defaults to hard debug. So this will not actually execute a query. We want to first see, like, okay, what is the query? How is it executed? And is it something that is safe to use? Okay, so that said, if I run this now, what I expect to happen, oops, can I create a UID? Connection failed. So first thing I want to probably check is why my connection doesn't work. PHP API. Because I'm stupid. So that's of course the database name, not the table name. And that should basically get us back to where we want to be. Okay, so this is basically what it's doing, right? So we have an insert into product, set name is question mark, description is question mark, price is question mark, ID is, and then you can see here it automatically generates, unhexes this in order to make it binary. And here I get my exclusion. See that? Okay, so which basically means it's relatively safe to work directly with user input as long as we're talking about defining the keys, right? So that basically means I could almost ensure, well, where are we here? That this can now basically happen. So what I will do is I'm not going to debug this anymore. And so what I do then, if I execute it now, I'm expecting this to work. There is no result. That's fine. It's an insert. That's fine. I'm basically getting the insert back. So if I look into my database now, I will basically find this test product, right? So here's my test product, some cool goggles, and so on and so on. So at this point, we do have a valid entry. So that's pretty awesome. So let's now basically say, okay, we're done inserting. This is something I don't need anymore. And the body is something I'm going to assume to be empty. And what I can do now is basically two steps, right? So here is basically my product. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to say, okay, get me this product. So we have basically used the DB ask in the form of an automatic insert. To familiarize you a little bit more with that is like what I can also do is I can simply start by greater than, and that allows me to write just SQL, right? So now basically I do, okay, select everything from product, and then I'm going to say where delete date is null. Oops. Okay. So let's actually simply return this and see what we get here. It probably says like it's redundant. Yeah, unnecessary, got it. So if I execute this now, what I do get is I do get the ID, name, description, price, insert date, and so on. Do you see that? That works fine. So I already have the right kind of entity. So I can simplify this down a lot. And how do I do that? I basically say, well, I'm going to use the DB easy. So this body basically can be done to, okay, DB easy. And I'm going to select from product, right? In that case, everything. And here's my condition where I say, okay, ID is body ID. Okay? Now, I also want to say in this case that delete date is null. So I can say, okay, delete date is empty, or if I want to make it shorter, I can say without delete date. Okay? Now I will still get an array here, right? So if I execute that, I will see, oh, that I didn't give it an ID. That was pretty stupid, actually, because ID2 is not what we want. Let's actually do the following and get rid of the condition for a second, because I need to have an ID quickly. Let me steal that one. And let's assume that we're actually asking for this. Okay. Okay. So let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. And this is what we're going to comment back. Okay. So here I now basically get a product by ID. If it exists, basically this it's going to fill, but it's going to fill with an array. So what I mean by that is, so if I call this now, still not working. It's still not working because I probably forgot that I need to transform it. Let me see if I'm right before I say something stupid. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So what I need to do in this case is, so I chose the UUIDs. What that does is we are going to basically have to transfer between hex and binary. So you can see this is a hex value, and I need to unhex this value into binary because that's how I save it in my database. So I do that with a simple $sign in front of the actual string, so that the ID string, the hexed ID string, would then be converted into binary, and then I can basically look it up that way. So that's pretty straightforward. So I still get, and that was my actual point, I still get an array. You can see this starts with 0, but I want to have a product, a single product in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this whole thing in the index model first. Okay, I'm going to wrap this in the index model first, and that will basically do the following. It will basically set out it's like search 1, right? So now it's going to be directly in my, so look at this 0, and if I execute this, that is gone, so I will directly get what I'm actually looking for. And if I for whatever reason have something that cannot be found, let's do it like this, then, oh, actually that was stupid, then I simply get a complete empty result, right? So that's basically how I can work with it easiest on the front end. So it's not an error, but it's empty. So this kind of screams at me because there could be actually a problem with the query itself. So I'm going to wrap all of this in a try catch block and say, okay, so do me a favor, try this, and then catch, and then I'm going to have the DB exception. Now, if that happens, the only thing I really want the the user to know is that something is wrong. So I'm actually going to throw a new route exception, right? So be careful, I'm actually using this up here, and with a 500 error. Okay, so I'm going to have to look at my log then, because I don't want to basically get any kind of database issues out to the user. So for security reasons, the only thing I'm really going to do here is say like, no, something went terribly wrong, and it's none of your business why. So this screams at me because of my missing doc blocks. Let's do that quickly. Let's add all of the doc blocks here. And okay, so now we're basically set up to use this. So I can now basically ask for products, and I can add products. Now, in reality, what you do want to do here is you don't just want to have people add products. So you probably want to ensure either a session or a JSON token, and that's something that you can find in a other video of mine concerning JWT. I will basically link that also down there. But what we want to look into is like, is this really a nice way of working with it? Because that's not a really nice separation, and we do have this weird model folder here after all. So what we want to do instead is maybe setting up our model on a different level. So let's abstract step by step. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal again and say, okay, neoan3 new model product. Okay, model product created. So let's look at that. Let's close all other stuff here. So we now have a product model. Do you see that? And so the product model doesn't do much as of now, but what it does have is a migrate JSON, which is empty at the moment, and it has a by ID and defined that those are just placeholders. You can of course create whatever you want. Now, how can we work with this the easiest way? So what we probably want to do at this point is, first of all, we want to work and collaborate. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this product model understands the setup of our database. So I'm going to want to have the structure of product basically put into my migrate JSON. I can do this manually, but since this is actually called the same, I can also automate this and basically say, okay, neoan3 migrate models, and then the direction is down, so from the database to the migrate, and that's probably going to ask me for some credentials here. That should be okay. No, it's probably not okay. Let's create new credentials here. So that's localhost. The DB name is PHP_API. The DB user is root. It's correct. The port is also correct. Save password, yes please. And the password is Nachtschatten for me. Okay, that's done. And so if I open up the migrate again, I will see, and actually let me reformat that for you, that it now got like the complete definition of a product, right? This will help us a lot when we automate our process, right? So what we can do, of course, is we can basically say, well, this, what we wrote here, right? This is something we can move out completely. So let's abstract it in first. So we say by ID. And yep, so it's going to ask me whether or not I want to use that. Yes, I want to use that. And I basically do almost the same. So here, of course, it's just going to be ID for me, right? And basically can more or less do the same thing here and say, okay, do me a favor and try if you can get this product. right? And here I'm going to say, okay, if not, then do me a favor and actually I'm going to have a regular exception here. Throw new exception. To get model. The reason why I'm writing this so sloppy is because this is also just a step in between. We will get to that in a second. So, and then I have return product. Okay. So what does this do now? Well, it simplifies a lot of things here, right? So because what I can do now, if I have this body ID, I can basically say, you know what? Instead of any of this, what I'm going to do is return product model by ID, and then I'm simply going to say body ID. Okay, so now from wherever I am, and yeah, this doesn't make sense anymore, I understand. Actually, we're going to regenerate that, don't worry about it for now. And of course, like, none of this stuff I need, right? Why do I still need that? Oh, for the, okay, we still have to fix that. Let's ignore that for now, but this basically, that's a regular exception now that I can have. And since this will be a pure API, the only thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, try to get this. I am not even going to do that. Not even going to do that. You know what? I'm going to be even lazier and say, like, this whole project is a complete API project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually not throw an exception. I'm going to throw a route exception. Right? Just not going to happen. Okay. Okay. So, and then here I can basically say generate the doc blocks. Okay. And that's all I need to do. So if this fails, I get a 500 error now automatically in my API. So let's see if that's still working. It is. We get that pretty nicely. So now wherever I am, so I don't need to be on get product. If I have an update or whatever, I can now always say product model by ID, and everything will be fine. So I got this here, so that's all fine. I probably want to have my doc block here as well, just to have that, and then I have everything solved. Now here's my find. If I have different conditions, and I can basically further automate this whole process. And how that works is something that we are probably going to look into the next time, because now we basically already have like a clean structure of how things work, and you should be able to generate your basic API operations accordingly. And yes, so far for this little tutorial. And if you have more questions, be sure to just shoot them over, and I will basically try to answer them as soon as possible, or even jump into how stuff like that works and what kind of, or I'm actually also happy to look into your code if you feel like it. If you share it on GitHub, I will probably start a new series of code reviews, and feel free to reach out and basically get that in as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope it helped, and I see you next time.